Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us on the Newsfeed PM edition. Now, the National Democratic Revolution is inconsistent with the Constitution, and cadre deployment is at the root of corruption in South Africa. This is all according to Paul Hoffman, Director of Accountability Now, who joins me to expand. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. You say that the National Democratic Revolution is inconsistent with the Constitution. What do you mean by this?
Well, if you take a look at the Constitution itself, you will see that it is based on the idea of multi-party democracy under the rule of law, in which there is a separation of powers and in which we have independent institutions like the judiciary, the National Prosecuting Authority, and the Chapter 9 institutions. If you take a look at what the National Democratic Revolution, which is the ideology that gets the ANC and its associates out of bed in the morning to do their thing, then you see that what they are seeking to do via this revolution is to secure hegemonic control of all the levers of power in society. So multi-partyism, the idea of the rule of law, the separation of powers, the checks and balances on the exercise of power between various independent institutions, all goes by the board. It is totally inconsistent with what the Constitution set out to do.
So what about cadre deployment then? That's also something you've raised as a point of concern.
Yes. Cadre deployment is in fact the means by which the National Democratic Revolution is pursued. You can certainly deploy cadres to political positions. The president of the country is a deployed cadre. So are all the ANC members of parliament, the ANC provincial councillors, municipal councillors, mayors, and so on. That's perfectly in order. That you are entitled to do because there is freedom of association and because there is a right to organize politically. But when it comes to the state-owned enterprises and the public service, the public administration in South Africa, the Constitution is very clear that the method of appointing personnel has to be in accordance with good human resource management practices and career development practices. And cadre deployment basically means if you happen to be a loyal member of the ANC, you crack the nod for the job in the civil service. And that essentially sets up a conflict of interest between the interests of the ANC and the interests of the people of South Africa. So it has been held to be unconstitutional in old litigation. There is pending litigation to confirm that position. And the Zondo Commission has also said that cadre deployment is in fact a cause of the state capture phenomenon, because people in a conflict of interest situation have chosen to.
Pardon me for interrupting you. We heard President Cyril Ramaphosa coming out to defend cadre deployment at the Zondo Commission, saying that it's an important part of implementing the ruling party's mandate.
Yes, I'm afraid he's got that wrong in spades. They can certainly implement their mandate by getting people into elected office, but to suggest that only members of the ANC are appropriate for the public service is completely wrong. It undermines the idea of equality before the law, which is set out in the Bill of Rights as an equality provision which is binding on the state. The state has to protect and respect the right to equality. They tend to elide the idea that the loyal cadres of the ANC are the representatives of all black people in South Africa. No, that's not the case, and it's going to be even less of the case after the next general election.
While we're still talking about the work of the Zondo Commission, the release of the final state capture inquiry report signaled an important milestone in the country's attempts to come to terms with the impact of state capture. What do you think needs to happen to ensure that all the time and money and energy spent over the past 3 years is not in vain?
I would look for three things. The first would be the ending of this cadre deployment. The second would be the establishment of a Chapter 9 institution that works in the anti-corruption field against serious forms of corruption. I would suggest 5 million rand or more, and of course of the kleptocracy and the state capture phenomenon. We can't expect the NPA or the Hawks to get that right. They never have and they never will. And the third thing that I would look to see is reform of the electoral system so that politicians are more answerable to ordinary people and less answerable to party bosses, which is currently the unfortunate situation.
Yeah, especially as one would argue that essentially what essentially underpins state capture is the ethical code, so to speak, in the country that actually endorses it.
Yes. Now, the Constitution says that the public service must promote a high standard of professional ethics and use resources in an effective and efficient and economic way. And that clearly hasn't happened while deployed cadres have been running around looking after the ANC's interests instead of looking after the interests of the country. And very often the ANC's interests get swept away in the corrupt activities that have gone on in various state-owned enterprises and indeed in the procurement of PPE, the COVID premierism, all indications that South Africa's public service has lost its way because the public servants find themselves in a conflict of interest situation between the interests of the ANC and the interests of the people of South Africa, which are not coincidental interests at all. Very often the interests of the ANC collide with the interests of poor people.
You made mention of the Hawks and the NPA a short while ago, and all eyes have essentially been on the Hawks and the NPA, especially in the wake of the release of the final report, because South Africans are looking to see who is held accountable. How important is their role in ensuring some element of accountability?
Yes, unfortunately, when Jacob Zuma took power, the investigative functions in relation to corruption were given to the Hawks and the prosecutorial functions were left with the NPA. Now, a prosecution is only as good as the investigation that precedes it, and the Hawks are a police unit in a very corrupt South African police service. So it has not worked. No big fish in the world of corruption has ever seen an orange overall during the period since 2007 when Jacob Zuma won at Polokwane. And if those that have seen the inside, like Jackie Salebi, Mr. John Block, are prosecuted because of a Scorpions investigation, not because of a Hawks investigation. So it's very clear that the clout or the sapiential authority of the Hawks is not sufficient to do the investigations properly, and the National Prosecuting Authority is today a hollowed-out institution infested with saboteurs that have been planted there to make sure that nobody who was involved in state capture ever goes to jail. Now, it's not good enough, and that's why we say let's have a new institution that is able to take over the tasks of preventing, combating, investigating, and prosecuting all in one shop the phenomenon of serious corruption in South Africa.
Very well. Let's leave it there for now, and thank you for your time. Accountability Now Director Paul Hoffman speaking to the root causes of corruption and some solutions when it comes to tackling it.